Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of Franchise Euphoria, the podcast to help people and businesses succeed in franchising. My name is Josh Brown, and I am a franchise attorney, entrepreneur, and general lover of all things small business. And I am thrilled to have as my first guest, Mike Kawula. Mike is the founder of selfemployedking.com, where new and inspiring entrepreneurs can read reviews from users on the best online tools and internet courses. Self-Employed King is in the process of rolling out a membership program that offers small business owners affordable monthly marketing help in the key areas that will grow their businesses and revenues. Michael has owned 2 franchises, consults 2 startups, and started an online business ranked the 144th fastest growing company by Inc. magazine in 2012's top 500 companies. Wow, Mike, that's quite the bio. How are you doing today?
We're doing awesome, Josh. Thanks for having me on the show and being the first guest.
You know, I'm thrilled to have you, and thanks for accepting the invitation. I think it's going to be an interesting ride, and I definitely look forward to learning more about your story. And I think that's probably a great jumping off point if you just want to give a little bit more background on your story and your experiences in business and franchising.
Sure. Appreciate being on the show. This started for me at the age of 29. I remember the date. It was 9/10, the day before 9/11. And my wife, I'd come home from work, and my wife says to me, "Let's go out and have dinner." And we never went out when we had work the next day, but she wanted to go out, and so something must have been up. She wanted to talk, and she told me we were going to have our first child. And she was super excited. I was.
Wow.
You know, I've got 3 kids now, and I was so excited. But the thing is that I traveled a lot. I was a advisor in the finance industry. Was doing a lot of tech work also, and she just. She didn't want me to be one of those parents that wouldn't see their kids Monday through Friday, and neither did I. So I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that was probably the best push that got me to go. So I made some serious changes, and unfortunately, obviously, the next day we all know. But within that next 12 months, I was in my first franchise.
So was a franchise the first business that you owned?
Well, I had originally I wasn't looking at the franchise route, although like everybody, I'm sure all your listeners, we all wait for Entrepreneur Magazine to come out and rank the top fastest growing franchises out there, or the hottest growing franchises. I've been Success Magazine, Inc. Magazine, you name it, since I was little, reading them and loving them. And I didn't want to go the franchise route in the beginning, so I started looking at independent businesses. And I looked at a car wash and found out that the books were cooked. Unfortunately, they said they were doing all this business. I hired somebody to sit out front and count the number of cars for a week that was going in there being washed, and the numbers just didn't add up. I almost bought a kid's batting cage facility. They didn't tell us of some insurance issues that they had from lawsuits that could have put some risk for me and an investor that I had. So I kept on running into. I did all this work and kept running into all these problems. So I started looking at franchising, and the one thing about franchising that I found some difficulties in is that at the end of the day, I wanted to know if I work hard, what would my return be for the work that I did? And as we all know, it's kind of hard to get that number. Now it's in the UFOC, but it's really difficult to accurately know. So you need to speak to a lot of franchisees when you're doing your validation process, which, I started going through the validation process with a whole bunch of franchises. And I finally decided that the best way for me to learn about franchising would be I bought a franchise consulting business. So where I was able to help other individuals find franchises that matched their goals and objectives. And while doing that, I could also learn about all these different franchises out there. So that was the first franchise that I bought.
Well, that's fascinating. So how did you go about the process of doing the due diligence? I mean, you mentioned briefly about talking to other franchisees, which is always, always, always a very, very smart thing to do. But for yourself, did you have anybody else that you looked to, or did you have anybody else that you knew in the franchising space that was able to give you some guidance along the way?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. So I did a lot of research online, and I probably did, I would say, the most validation for both the first franchise that I purchased and the second. I called everybody that was in the UFOC, both previous and past franchisees, to really peel back the layers, because I learned along the way. I'm a big E-Myth believer, so I'm sure you've read the book, correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my favorites.
So, I'm a big believer in the E-Myth, and for the listeners that haven't read it, I strongly suggest picking it up. But, the philosophy is, if I'm a pizzeria maker, and I become a pizzeria owner, well, the chances are I'm not going to be the guy in the back making the pizzeria, making the pizza every day. I'm just not going to be doing that, else the business isn't going to succeed. So when I started peeling back the layer on all these different businesses, like I'm the least handy guy in the world. But I almost bought a franchise called Handyman Matters, because I don't know if you know of them, but I looked at them and Mr. Handyman. Why? Because it was the business, of being, a business owner. I was going to have multiple employees out there and, build a system. And that's what I did like about a franchise is, number one, the ability to speak to previous and current franchisees to learn about it. And number two, what I really loved about it was the systems that were in place.
Well, no, it's interesting you make that point, because I think that's one of the biggest things that draws people to franchises. And I think that in many respects, whether or not you own a franchise or a non-franchise business, I think a big priority for any successful businessman is to set up a company that has systems and processes, so that you are being more efficient with your time, so you're being more efficient in the things that you do, and ultimately you can drive a better value and a bigger return on investment. So it sounds
Definitely.
to me like go ahead.
Yeah, systems, whether you're a franchise or not a franchise owner, a system needs to be in place. It just makes the business run so much smoother. I've seen so many businesses that don't have systems in place, don't have marketing plans in place, and that's typically the reasons why those businesses don't succeed.
Well, and it sounds like you spent some time doing due diligence, meeting with all the franchisee owners. How long did you take? What was the time frame between when you first started searching and researching on franchising to when you finally made the decision to go forward?
Well, my first franchise, again, I was working with a franchise broker that was showing me all these different franchises, and they were pushing me along at a much more faster pace than I wanted to. So, and you could tell they were salespeople. They had these canned responses that, I was dragging my feet and it was normal and come over my fear. But it wasn't that I had fear. It was that I was really doing my homework and my due diligence. So to answer your question, I took, 30 plus days because, you got to call people. You got to wait for a phone call back. I was working at the time, so I did this both at night, at lunch, and in the morning before work. So I was setting up calls all of the time, and whenever somebody was close by, and I would recommend this to anybody considering a franchise, go out and find somebody that you can go and just be their shadow for the day and watch them work on their business, not in their business.
Great idea.
It really did wonders for me.
Well, and so how long did you own this franchise?
My goal was to purchase it and spend at least 2 years doing coaching and learning about all these other franchises. Within 6 months, I had helped so many customers because I actually got into some outplacement firms and did a lot of speaking in front of folks. And in turn, I just had an influx of customers coming to me and folks to work with. So I had a lot of people and my business expanded real fast. So within 2 years, it didn't take me 2 years. I owned it for 2 years, but within 6 months, I found my next franchise.
Really? So then when you found your next franchise, did you sell the first one or did you run two at the same
I
time?
ran two at the same time because, one of my big things at age 29 that held me back a little bit was that addiction to the paycheck. Responsibility. So that's sometimes the thing that prevents folks from moving forward. So for me, what I did is I call it leapfrogging. I took a less demanding job at the time before my first franchise. So as I could spend more time doing researching, I didn't make as much, but I still had a paycheck coming in and it afforded me the opportunity to start my consulting business. And then once my consulting business, it just started ballooning after my first month, I was able to quit my job. Well, when I started my second franchise, it expanded so fast. So really within 6 months of owning that franchise, I was Rookie of the Year for my cleaning franchise. And it was just, it started going so fast. So it took me some time because of franchise laws. I had signed a contract with these folks. And that's why we'll leave their name out. But it was difficult for me to get out of my contract with this franchise. So, within 2 years, I was out.
So that must have been interesting. You were running a cleaning franchise as well as a consulting franchise.
Yes. So I remember at night being on the phone with customers or, that I was coaching along at 9 o'clock because, the cleaning business in the beginning, you're doing everything. I had 4 employees out there cleaning homes. I'm the one, I didn't have a manager yet. So I was the one answering the phone, doing the estimates, and then doing my coaching calls in between. So, talk about the hustle. There was a lot of work.
Wow, that's fascinating. Tell me some of the positive experiences that you take from your franchise experience.
I do have to say that the cleaning franchise particularly had amazing support back at the home office. Not only did they had their own cleaning business that they did all the testing in, so they were a nationwide franchise that it's called the Cleaning Authority, and they actually did all of the testing out of the home office because they had a very large office there. And I just love the systems that they had in place. If I ever had questions, about whether it be insurance questions or, hiring questions, all those new things when you're a new entrepreneur that you don't know all the time unless if you have a coach. So you're learning this stuff. I could always pick up the phone and call the home office and ask them a question. And it was like having my own back office. So I really liked that. The system was great. They had a marketing system in place, and it was good. And it helped me by watching all these systems. When I built my online business, I used a lot of the philosophies of watching the way systems were, and I built systems from day one in my business. And I think that's why we had such phenomenal growth and phenomenal success, is that I used what I learned in franchising and just applied it to the online world.
Yeah, and that's kind of fascinating that you say that, because essentially what you did is a lot of people do it in the reverse order, but the way you did it seems to make the most sense. I mean, you basically took the opportunity to work in a couple different franchises and see how to implement systems, because I think one of the things is entrepreneurs and small business people all talk about wanting to have systems, but it's a lot easier said than done. I mean, even in my own business, in my own law firm, I try to set up systems, and you can do it, but following the system and making sure constantly that you're taking the time to make sure that you're doing it in the most efficient way. It's a lot more than just writing down, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is what we do. There's a lot more to it.
Definitely. And, watching everything that you do each and every day to see, is there anything repetitive that I'm doing that, there's a software out there that could automate this, or, possibly outsourcing it to somebody else. So is that, I can focus more on building the business. And that's something I think, some business owners in the beginning, they just feel overwhelmed. And, there's so much more time if they just looked at what they were doing, I think.
How do you think personality plays into picking a franchise, or into even deciding if you would be a good candidate for franchising?
I'm a big believer in networking. So again, this is going to fall back to the validation process. If you're not even deciding yet on what franchise fits for you, I think individuals should go out there and, there's a lot of like local franchise shows in all counties throughout the country. Attend those, but realize that the folks that are there to sell you a franchise at the end of the day. So, go there with that understanding, but talk to them, ask questions, find out what the typical day is like for the owner, both in day one, 2 years into the business, and 5 years into the business. Learn about what the exit strategies are like. Even before you start the business, you should know, how do folks go about selling these franchises as they build them up? These are all questions that I think should be asked. So when you ask about personality, that's why it's real important to learn, because in a cleaning business, some folks would think, well, here's a guy on Wall Street I was working, and I'm going to go out and clean toilets. No, I spent, a lot of time managing employees. I had 30 plus employees, and, I had managers that I had to manage the managers. So, look at what the day is like and realize that, who am I going to be? Like, for a cleaning franchise, you better have a good personality, be able to connect with people, be good with HR, and have the ability to go out and also meet with customers, be somewhat of a salesperson. I saw a lot of franchisees that, weren't good salespeople and didn't put people in place to replace their lack of sales skills, and these individuals went out of business because of it. So you have to look at what your strengths are and look at what makes that business succeed. And if you're not going to be the right person for it, you better make sure that day one that you're going to have somebody in there that can help you with it, so as that you can move forward.
Now, do you think there's something to the notion that certain people just shouldn't get into franchising? There's this notion out there, and I'm always curious to hear what people think about it, that owning a franchise is somehow less entrepreneurial than starting a business from scratch. I'd be curious your thoughts on that, having owned two franchises.
Yeah, would I own a franchise again? No. I've kind of got the concept down, and I think from a beginner standpoint, what some franchises offer against some of the better ones. Again, falling back on those systems, but I don't believe it's right for everybody. If you're extremely entrepreneurial and don't like following directions, and are going to want to consistently try to do things your own way, well, you better think again, because some franchises aren't going to want that, in the franchisee. So, some of the better franchisors out there are actually going to be a little bit more restrictive in what type of franchisees they're going to take in the beginning. So they're going to validate you as an owner because they want to see you succeed, because when you succeed, they succeed, and it helps the brand. So, I think you need to ask yourself as an individual, am I somebody that can follow the system and stay inside the system and not be the cowboy out there?
Yeah. So do you find yourself to be that kind of entrepreneurial person that you went down the franchise route, but it's just not right for you because you like to be the one now to create the system?
Definitely. And I'm more of the cowboy. So it's, I'm going to want to try, every market's different. So if you're following a cookie cutter plan, for instance, that's a nationwide franchise, because, I wouldn't recommend looking at a brand new franchise, because you're buying a system. And if you're about to invest, whether it's a $20,000 or $50,000 in franchise fees, and then all these other startup costs, well, if it's a small startup, what are you getting for that? Now, if you're buying a nationwide franchise and buying into that system, well, yes, it's a nationwide franchise, but how does that work specifically in your market? Because if you're the first one coming into there, you might need to do things differently. So, for instance, I saw some forms of marketing working nationwide in other parts of the country that did not work in my market. So I had to make changes. So, I think folks need to look at that and really just say, well, can this franchise succeed in my market? And if it can't, how can you possibly do it yourself? So, Josh, do you know off the top of your head what the average franchise fee is?
I mean, there's the average, I think, as far as the statistics go, and I can't remember who put out the statistic, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 150,000 to 200,000. Okay. Now, that you got to take that with a grain of salt, because it all depends on the kind of franchise that you're buying.
So you're investing a good large sum of money. Say if you're going independently, what is that franchise offering? Well, they're offering, marketing support, right? They've got a system in place, a marketing system in place. Could I go out and find a marketing coach? Possibly, maybe. Are they offering operational support? Could I go out and find an operational coach? There's tons of people out there. So could I go out there and surround myself with the right folks? See, some small business owners don't do that, and they kind of just pot along, right? But
absolutely, I think it's fascinating too, because I think that franchising is certainly not for somebody who's looking to bootstrap. Right? That's the whole idea.
Definitely not.
That's the whole idea of buying the franchise. But it's also sort of interesting because I've talked to entrepreneurs who are true entrepreneurs, and it's sort of interesting when they'll sometimes tell me, God, I could use the discipline that a franchise provides, right? Because a lot of problems sometimes with true entrepreneurs is it's difficult for them to stay focused because they're idea people and a new idea every day. And part of the thing about a franchise is it does keep you focused within a system. So it's just sort of fascinating how even though a true entrepreneur would be a terrible fit for most franchises, I think there are skills that could cross over and complement them.
Definitely. And you've got to take into account if they're using, the royalties. So if you're going to be spending 6% and doing $400,000, $500,000 a year, you're going to be spending $30,000 a year. Well, could you spend maybe a third of that and invest it back into your business as an independent? These are questions that folks need to look at, I think.
Yeah, and one of the goals of this podcast, one of the main goals I have is to, provide no fluff, practical, good educational advice for people because like you said, it's a lot of money that people are investing in franchises. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about any negative experiences that you had. Were there things where maybe your expectations didn't align with the franchisors, or any kind of experiences that led you to conclude that franchising just really isn't for me?
Well, again, you've got to realize that, maybe doing your homework before and consulting with an attorney and realizing that you're signing a contract. So my first franchise, I didn't realize what that meant in essence. So I committed contractually to something, and I wasn't able to exit as easy as I liked. So that was, I would say, the first negative. But it's my own fault. I think had I just consulted somebody beforehand, I would have known a little bit ahead of time what I was getting into. Requirements. What does the franchise require? Certain franchises require you to spend X amount of dollars in marketing each and every month. Well, what happens if that X amount of dollars isn't working in your local area and you need to change it up, but you're still required by their contractual agreement with them that you sign, that you still have to spend that money? Well, if it's not working, you're kind of going to be spending money and then having to do other advertising too if you want to see your business succeed. I've seen that in a couple of franchises. So again, it comes down to doing your due diligence, I think, and really understanding what you're about to sign and speaking to as many other franchisees throughout the country as possible to really get not only the roses, because the franchise coach or whoever you're working with is going to tell you 10 people to call, and they're probably going to be the 10 people that are having an amazing experience. Go find the 10 people that aren't having an amazing experience and talk to them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I talk to people all the time who are coming back from a discovery day, let's say, where you
Yep.
go and the franchisor takes you around. And if you're not feeling rosy about your franchise at that point, you better run, because you should be feeling
Definitely.
you should be feeling fantastic, because they're pumping you up with all of the positives. And to be fair, they are showing you their system too, and introducing you to people. And so it's always, the discovery day is also a great time to just kind of take in a lot of things in addition to what they're saying, but look around at the organization, look around at how they're organized and who's doing what. I mean, there are some franchises out there that are very large franchises, and it's surprising to learn that you have the the owners of the franchise doing so many different things that maybe should be passed on to somebody else. The whole getting back to your notion, Michael, and the E-Myth philosophy of working on the business instead of in the business. And I'm always amazed when I see that in franchising. And then there's the flip side of that too, where you see organizations and franchises that are growing and they're doing it in a very slow, deliberate, organic, and prosperous way because they are putting teams in place to help manage the process and manage the communication between the franchisees and franchisors. I'm curious, did you find a big difference between the two different franchises in communication and in organizational structure?
Night and day. It was the first one was just not a good communication whatsoever. And I had a friend that owned Quiznos who had the same experience too. Like they were growing so fast, rapidly, and they just had a terrible experience. They also lost a lot of money. But the second franchise, very organized. Again, they had an intranet where everything was posted all the time. They had a system in place that we knew exactly what the marketing was all about and how it was going to be spent, the dollars. We knew what our royalties were being spent on. So, that was all great. I mean, I validated with some franchise models that were large national names that when I really peeled back the layers to find out what the marketing plan was that I was buying, they didn't have one, but they had a very big national name. And I'm glad that I did my homework, because if I was going to spend that kind of money, I would have hoped that I would have had a little bit more support. So, it's all different. You definitely got to do your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd be curious, is there one thing that maybe you know now that you wish you had known before you bought your franchises?
There's a theme. I'm feeling this theme, and it's systems. How important systems are, and that I could have possibly taken these systems and just applied them in the amount of money that I spent on the franchise in my own type of business that I was looking to create. That's the systems work, and that's really the beauty of a franchise, and why the better ones do so well. And I think a lot of business owners, independent, can learn a lot from looking at these systems that franchisees use and implementing them in their own business.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's one thing to have a system for one business, but having a system that works across many businesses is really the secret sauce.
Definitely.
In franchising. Well, I really appreciate your time, Michael. I'd love to, if you could take a couple of minutes here to talk about your current business and what you do now.
Well, I appreciate that. It's Self-Employed King is, we're real excited. I've started to part from an online company that I own, and my partner is buying me out of it at the moment. And I've started Self-Employed King because there's so many tools out there online, and I think new entrepreneurs and even existing entrepreneurs get overwhelmed and trying to say, well, what works in my business and what won't work, and they go out and do all this research and test things out and possibly spend some money on internet courses to help them out. But there's no way of really validating out there and seeing, well, what ones are good and what ones aren't. So real excited. I've been out there interviewing folks who have used these internet tools or taken these internet courses, spoken to the founders to really say, does this work? And is it worth somebody's time? So that's real exciting. And we're launching shortly a membership site where, small business owners, they hear a lot of great marketing ideas, side, they just don't know how to implement it, or if they're going to use their local help, like to maybe make some changes to a website, that's going to cost you a couple $100 to $1,000. But really, for somebody that knows what they're doing, within an hour they can get that work done and get it done rapidly. So I'm real excited because we're going to be offering to small business owners basically a back office to all of these different tech people that can help them out and make their businesses better and help them succeed better and faster. So we're excited. Self-Employed King is just, it's moving in the right direction, and our traffic is growing. And it's a good community. So I appreciate you asking that.
No, it sounds fantastic, and definitely keep us posted on that. I'd love to hear about your future successes. And where can people find you?
Just jump on over to selfemployedking.com or hit me up on Twitter. Twitter is self-employed king, but within the employed, there's no E. It's just self-employed with a D. So self-employed king. But hopefully you can link up to it. But I'm active on Twitter, active really in all social channels. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's great. Hit me up with an email if you have specific questions. If I can help in any way, I write a lot on my blog about franchising, and I'd be happy to help anybody out in answering any specific questions.
Well, thank you so much. I have no doubt that the knowledge you've shared today and your experiences are definitely going to help numerous people. And I really appreciate, again, you taking the time to come on and share those with us.
Great. Well, we wish everybody great entrepreneurial successes.
Thanks, Mike. We'll talk soon.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.